This is the Framework Laptop 13. We introduced it in 2021 as a fully upgradable, long-lasting computer, and we've shipped 7 generations and a colossal number of units out into the world. So 5 years in, there's a big question. Do we need to do a blank slate redesign to meet the needs of 2026 and beyond? Or do we keep updating the design we have to continue to deliver on generational upgradability? It turns out we can do both. This is the Framework Laptop 13 Pro. It's a complete ground-up redesign of the product, and it's still backwards and forwards compatible with the entire lineup of Framework Laptop 13. That means it's entirely repairable, upgradable, and customizable, and it's still a thin, light, high-performance 13.5-inch notebook. That makes it ideal for developers, Linux users, DIYers, and even just general productivity. We captured a ton of learnings over 7 generations. We read through literally thousands of reviews, surveys, and comments. We analyzed 5 years of repair data, quality reports, and RMAs. We took all of the feedback that you have to make this the product that you want from us. We called it Pro for a reason, to knock off Apple. Not actually. It's actually because it's a giant step up. It's got a full CNC aluminum chassis with this awesome refined ID and structure. We actually made an entirely custom display with touch support. It has a haptic touchpad. It's got excellent Linux compatibility right out of the box. And it has what you asked for most of all, a massive improvement in battery life. Our internal prompt for this product was actually, how do we build the MacBook Pro for Linux users? We heard you over and over and over again. You want MacBook Pro level battery life in a machine that actually respects your rights. We figured out how to deliver on that. We've more than doubled battery life generation over generation. We had around 8 hours of Netflix 4K streaming on our last generation Framework Laptop 13. Now we've got over 20 hours. That's actually longer than a MacBook Pro M5 for this use case, and we're seeing massive improvements across every use case we test. Web browsing, YouTube streaming, standby, and more. To pull this off, our battery now has 74 watt-hour capacity. That's 22% higher than our last generation, and 35% higher than our original. We increase energy density to 850 watt-hours per liter, and we actually also increased the physical size of the pack. That's a great improvement in battery capacity, but the even bigger jump in battery life comes from efficiency improvements all throughout the system. We have Intel to thank for the biggest chunk of this. We're bringing in Intel's new Core Ultra Series 3 processors, codenamed Panther Lake, which are just insanely efficient. This is an incredibly cool, heterogeneous tiled architecture that Intel has brought in this CPU generation to deliver on both efficiency and performance. The CPU tile is on Intel's new 18A process node, which is just super efficient. The Core Ultra X7 and X9 versions have 3 tiers of cores, 4 performance cores, 8 efficient cores, and 4 low-power efficient cores. Those LPE cores are especially interesting. On workloads like video streaming that can drop onto just those, the battery life goes through the roof. This tile here is the GPU tile, which is on either Intel's 3 or TSMC's 3E process node. The X7 and X9 both have awesome GPU performance using 12 Xe3 cores. That means that a Framework Laptop 13 Pro is actually powerful enough to run full AAA games like Cyberpunk at playable settings. This third tile here is the I/O tile. That's on an Intel 6 node, and it brings stuff like 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports, which is actually what we route out to the 4 expansion cards. Very, very cool and innovative design by Intel this generation, and it's easily their biggest leap in the 5 years since they launched 11th gen Intel Core. The generational improvements don't just come from the processor, they come from how we used it. When we integrated this into our mainboard, we focused on performance, but of course, also on upgradability. That includes the memory. Framework Laptop 13 Pro is one of the first laptops in the market to ship with LPCAMM2. This is an entirely new memory module format that enables, for the first time, LPDDR to be modular and upgradable. We needed to move to LPDDR5X to get the massive improvements in power efficiency, but we couldn't go backwards from the 13 and solder the memory down. LPCAMM2 gives us both upgradability and efficiency. It connects into the mainboard using this fancy high-density interposer and gets compressed down into place with a shielding plate that actually also functions as a heat spreader. You can get up to 64 gigabytes of memory capacity with these Micron modules, and we expect to see even higher density modules coming in the future. In addition to LPCAMM2 support, Core Ultra Series 3 brings PCIe Gen 5 SSD support for the first time in a framework product. That means you can get around 14,000 megabytes per second of read and write throughput. That's about double what the last generation could get. On the Wi-Fi front, we've moved to Intel's new BE211 radio, which is also really power efficient and supports Wi-Fi 7. We've re-optimized the antenna for maximum throughput too. Most importantly, this is the same mainboard form factor we've used on every generation of Framework Laptop 13. That means you can take this new mainboard with the great new CPU, memory, storage, and Wi-Fi, and you can actually drop it into the Framework Laptop 13 you already own. We have a whole video on the upgrade path that you can find on our YouTube channel. In addition to the Intel Core Ultra Series 3, we also have new versions of Pro with our earlier AMD Ryzen AI 300 series mainboards. That means when you're ordering, you can choose between Intel or AMD in this new great chassis. One other major improvement on Pro is the new display. This is the first fully custom panel we've ever built. We really mean it when we say this product is a ground-up redesign. That means we got to optimize everything for the core use cases we know all of you are spending your time on. We've designed this with our partner CSOT to be the optimal high-efficiency productivity and coding display. Just like before, this is a 13.5-inch diagonal in a 3:2 aspect ratio that results in a lot of screen real estate in a pretty small system size. It's still 2880 by 1920 resolution, which makes it especially good for 2:1 scaling, especially in Linux. What's new is that we've really cranked up the brightness and the contrast. We went with an LTPS LCD to get the best power efficiency we could, but we're getting much better performance out of it than is typical in an LCD, including our last generation one. This goes up to 700 nit brightness. It also has a pretty novel anti-glare polarizer with a matte surface that gives it much higher contrast, especially in bright ambient lighting. Natively, it's 1800:1 contrast, and we kept 100% sRGB color space to optimize for power efficiency. This time though, we have per panel calibration for color accuracy. We also have 30 Hz to 120 Hz variable refresh rate, which is great both for efficiency and for making the experience really smooth. And finally, we got rid of those rounded corners from the last generation. There is one other big change that many of you have been asking for a long time. This is actually a touchscreen. When we started building Framework Laptop 12 with touch support, we knew we wanted to bring it to 13 too. We did that here with an in-cell touch design that keeps the panel thin and allows us to not need an additional glass layer. Above the display, we have the same 1080p webcam module as the last generation, and that is actually just about the only part of this product that we haven't changed. Let's take a look at the outside of this. Obviously, this looks a little different from before. Our default color scheme is what we call graphite, which is a dark anodized aluminum. The chassis is now fully CNC aluminum. That means we're taking extruded blocks of 6000 series aluminum and milling them to shape before anodizing them. That means that the Pro is extremely rigid and has much tighter tolerances than the original 13 chassis. This ID really is a nice refinement over the earlier generations. Even though the overall dimensions are the same, meaning this is still less than 16 millimeters thick, we were able to adjust the geometry to increase the size of the battery. The weight is now 1.4 kilograms, which is just slightly higher than the last 13 because of that larger battery. We also have a number of smaller improvements all across the system, like better structure around the hinges and an easier to use expansion card latch. In addition to graphite, we also have the traditional silver colorway available that you can use to upgrade your existing Framework Laptop 13. You can actually bring any previous generation of Framework Laptop 13 mainboard, drop it into the new chassis, and get access to that new battery. Moving over to the input area, we have a new, larger touchpad, and it's actually haptic. We put a ton of work into tuning this with our partners LightOn and Boreas. We know the golden standard in the space is the MacBook Pro. No PC maker has ever been able to catch up. We're working to make this the best feeling Windows and Linux touchpad on the market. That really was the last part of the input story that we wanted to perfect, and we really are aiming to achieve that. We have the same great keyboard key structure as before, with that great 1.5 millimeter key travel. And because the input cover now has a stiffer CNC structure, the overall key feel actually is slightly improved too. One thing that is also new here is that in addition to the huge range of languages we offer, we've introduced some awesome looking keyboard colorways that you can choose from. This is gray and orange. I actually personally love the lavender one. We also have the same great fingerprint reader as before, and that has great out-of-the-box support in Linux. Onto the speakers. We're just going through the greatest hits of customer and reviewer feedback here. We know that in our last generation, the speakers weren't quite as loud or as full sounding as you wanted them to be. So we have an entirely new speaker module that's now side ported out of the chassis to be able to use it better on different surfaces or on your lap. More importantly though, on the Intel version of Pro, we worked with Intel and Dolby, and we landed a full Dolby Atmos tuning. Their algorithms massively improve the audio experience. Linux is a huge part of why many of you are interested in our products. That brings us back to our initial prompt. How do we build the MacBook Pro for Linux users? We always design for Linux right from the start. That means component selection for Linux compatibility, support for firmware updates through LVFS, and contributing patches upstream where needed. And we've already sent development units of Framework Laptop 13 Pro to maintainers and developers across a huge range of distros, like Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch Linux, and more. For the first time, we also have pre-built versions of Framework Laptop 13 Pro with Ubuntu preloaded. We partnered with Canonical to make this our first Ubuntu certified product. That means you don't have to be a DIYer, and you get guaranteed support right out of the box. This is especially ideal for businesses deploying Linux machines internally. As always, we have both DIY and pre-built versions available. In addition to the Ubuntu pre-builts, of course, we've got Windows 11. We know that a lot of businesses are looking for that too. On the DIY path, you can configure the product more deeply and bring your own memory, storage, and operating system. And we've got one other new thing, which is that to go along with that big new battery, we've got a high efficiency 100-watt GAN power adapter that's just a little bit bigger than our previous generation one. And as always, we include a screwdriver right in the box. Let's bring this back to the original question. How do we build the MacBook Pro for Linux users? Or maybe if we put it a little differently, what does it take to build the best possible laptop for a power user or a software developer? For the last few years, the default answer actually has been MacBook Pro. There really is a lot to like there, but there's a lot that gets in the way too. We've seen an increasing number of developers moving from Macs to Framework Laptop 13 over the last 5 years. And they're coming for the upgradability, the performance, the keyboard, but they're especially coming for the idea that you can own your own computer and do what you want with it, including having an ideal Linux experience. With Framework Laptop 13 Pro, what we've done is narrow the gap on everything else. This really is a huge part of what I started this company for, to prove that repairability and upgradability doesn't mean compromising the core product experience, to prove that a product can actually get better over time instead of worse. We can't wait to see what you think of this because ultimately, this is your laptop, not ours.